Thank you so much for coming here today. I'm happy to be here, in Florianópolis, the beautiful city, and in Brazil. Today I'm going to talk about empathetic machines. And I'm going to introduce to you a little bit about some of work I have been doing for a few years, trying to create this concept of adaptive UX. That's something that I leverage using some work I learned from education. But first of all, what aconteceu to my Portuguese? I like to say some words in Portuguese. Muito obrigado for the oportunidade of estar aqui hoje. Mas a verdade é que eu sou brasileiro. Então, acontece que vocês vão perguntar, mas e aí? Por que você não está falando em português hoje, né? E o lance é que eu moro já há mais de 12 anos lá fora e eu tenho... muito da minha formação de trabalho foi feita em inglês e eu pensei até em falar em português, mas eu vi que eu não tenho vocabulário das palavras do que eu vou falar hoje em português, e para emenda não sair pior que o soneto, eu vou falar em inglês, mas as perguntas no final a gente pode falar em português sem problema. Tá legal? Vamos falar um pouco, let's talk a little bit about personalization. Personalization. Switching is not fast. Well, everybody are very used to personalization. Personalization is already a very big part of our lives already. We have some very common examples like Netflix, right? Like Netflix, you have the situation where you have recommendations that are based on in your watching behaviors, and also using microgenres to provide a very tailored experience back to you. Everybody knows that one. We have this different situation called Trunk Club, where you have an app and you use the app to set up some preferences of your clothing, if you like more particular different styles, and then actually a human go there and take that like a personal stylist and assembles for you a box and ships to you like a subscription, or maybe on demand as well. Then you have also everybody knows how feeds are filtered. So if you have a very clear political point of view, very often you're going to see only posts and opinions that are very similar to you, and that happens because there's a filter that is aligning and trying to serve things that you like. And if all your friends are also probably have the similar political opinion than you, then you're going to also even be more in this kind of thing that we all know how it's called, filter bubble. Then you have this interesting situation predicted offers. So this is a story from Target, I think from a few years ago. There was this story that a data scientist identified 25 products that if you buy those products, they could provide to you a prediction score of if you're pregnant or not. And based on that, they could change the mailing and all the marketing they would provide to you. And pretty much what's behind how we like to be in a situation where our context is personalized, because we want to feel cared and heard. It's a natural human thing, and that's something that how we leverage every time. The marketing is leveraged all the time to provide you an experience that pleases you. But what will be ultimate personalization? According to Jeff Bezos, ultimate personalization is when you go into a bar and sit down and the bartender puts a whiskey in front of you without having you to ask what you want. That's kind of a great level of personalization. That's not the same scene in the movie, because that's kind of a scary scene in the movie. But then we all know how to do that as well. For instance, when you're teaching your son, your child, how to ride a bike. And they're like holding the kid and trying to understand like what's the best way to push the kid enough to challenge herself or himself to go further and learn how to ride a bicycle, but also like how to not go too further and read the emotions of the kid in terms of like what is the right way to motivate and not to overwhelm the kid to be scared about that particular experience. The same thing like when you're trying to create a surprise party for a loved one. Like you know her tastes, the smell she likes, you know the food she likes, you know like all the things that she likes. And then you start to create this experience. It's very, very tailored, empathetic to the particular person. And that experience is not so much about individual things, but it's more about you showing that you care about the person and they love the person. So the experience as a whole is a consideration, not the individual parts. So pretty much what this is saying is that the ideal personalization is based in empathy. Empathy is what unlocks the possibility of like a personalization that is actually deep, not shallow as like just knowing if you like sugar or not sugar, right? So one question that we're going to discuss today with us here is like, how might we create empathetic machines? What will be the first step in terms of technology to get to a feeling where you can feel that the machines can provide a feeling of empathy back to us? How could we scale empathy in using technology? And how can make that something that's more part of our lives as well when interacting with technology? First thing I want to clarify when I talk about empathy here, I know there's a little nuance sometimes, like empathy in English and Portuguese is a little different as well, because we have the word sympathy as well, that's used sometimes exchangeable here. But the empathy I'm talking about here is called cognitive empathy. Is not about that you're necessarily feeling what the other person is feeling, but is about understanding and being aware of those feelings, of those experiences. And then, in our situation here, for the technology, I like to use this cognitive empathy to help the person back to achieve her or his goals. Okay, how can you do that, right? That sounds like a very beautiful, aspirational idea. And I think that is possible, and that is one of the things that I want to talk today. This feeling that actually this is possible came from working with education, and EdTech can inspire a path for us. I worked at IDEO for more than 6-7 years, and mostly around 4 years in education, and the rest around projects with social impact. And as you guys know, at IDEO, the main process is around design thinking, and design thinking is rooted in empathy, in trying to connect with people, to understand what they want and how they want, and use that for inspired design. So when you try to create an empathy with somebody, we're always looking at what they do, what they say, but we try to connect on a deeper level, try to also try to understand what they think, and what they feel. And with that information can inspire us to create design. And that connection with the people and building an empathy is an ongoing thing. Like once you start designing things, you keep these connections, interaction, evolving in a collaboration with people to deliver something. Okay, that's ideal. But what the point here is there was one particular project at IDEO that really, really inspired me. And it was one that I actually worked here in Brazil a few years ago for the Lehman Foundation in education. And the challenge we had was, how might we design a learning platform to develop literacy in young learners in Brazil? So we had to go to many places, very poor locations in the outskirts of São Paulo, like Capão Redondo, Taboão da Serra, and other very public schools. The target were kids of 4 to 7 years old. The initial ask was around creating educational apps. And then through our research, we realized actually that there are many other bigger issues before even going to an educational app. And this case was, okay, for instance, we noticed the kids, the teachers are extremely overwhelmed. They don't have time to do a lot of all the tasks they need to do, and they don't have time to give attention to the kids that need most attention. And then you have this problem that like nobody really gets attention. Another thing we notice is that the diagnosis of the kids is extremely laborious. They do a dictation, and then the dictation they evaluate the answers of the kids to understand which level of literacy and which kind of mistakes the kids are doing, and use that information to adjust the class. But because for a class of 30 students, this is so much laborious, they do that only every 2 months. So the gap between the diagnosis and the actual state of the kids causes a lot of issues. And then we had to think about as well, what is how we're going to make something that will fit in these kids' lives and be a fun educational game. But then educational game will not work for solving those problems. We realized that actually the best solution was to create a set of tools to help the teachers offload them from all those tasks and help them to actually give attention to who needs most attention. But how are we going to do that? How are we going to be able to help the kids, the teachers with the diagnostics? How are we going to enter in the kids' minds and understand what they're thinking in a way to provide that information that's so useful for the teachers? How can we emulate that empathy and that understanding that the teachers have in a digital form? So we didn't have access to supercomputers at all, but we had access to super teachers with more than 25 years of experience teaching in public and private schools. And pretty much we worked with them with several months to try to make that empirical knowledge they had into software and break into rules that no ambiguous that could make software. And one of the main things we had to start with was to capture what the kid was thinking without a lot of interference. So we also emulated a dictation app that would allow the kid to enter whatever they're thinking without judgment. We're not going to say this is wrong or right away. We just allow the kid to write whatever they're thinking. And that's a big thing, to not have this judgment right away. Because what you learn with working with the teachers, we mapped all those mistakes, they actually inform what the kid is thinking, their mental model, the hypothesis they have about the written system. And we based on that, you could map mistakes, a setup of pattern of mistakes with a particular mental model, and then use that mental model to find the right exercise for the kids. I'm getting a little bit abstract here. I'm going to give an example soon. This is just a very high overview of adaptive platform, education platform is. You have one side, you have a diagnostic that always understands what's going on with the kid, try to evaluate in which level and which hypothesis the kid have in terms of the written system. And in the other side, you have the actual performance of the kids in games, how they are answering these exercises, how they are performing in evolving through the games. And then those two kind of little brains feed the actual variables of the game that are changing every time for every kid in a very personalized way. We mapped all of those things in several diagrams that we use for communicating with the developers and to keep integrity of this thinking of the logic for moving forward. And the game had to be fun as well. Tá bem animado. E aí, and then like we had like this, like of course, like as the initial goal was to provide tools for the teachers. We create like a dashboard back, like not a big dashboard, but several reports in a very easy, digestible way for kids to be able to, the teachers to be able to understand how to act on particular kids or in particular the whole class in a way that uses that information in a very active way. Okay, that was complex a little bit, but let's give a practical example right now. So, let's take an example of like I ask a kid to write cow, and the kid writes CWKJDSLFS. And I ask the same kid to write mosquito, and the kid writes MTL. If you look at what was asked and what was answered, it's like, okay, that's just a big miss, nothing's going to happen there. But the point here is that sometimes by being too objective, too direct to what actually is being just said in the surface, you miss actually the real information there. First of all, you notice that, you notice nothing yet? That some of the letters were there. So the kid has some sense of the letters that were being used. But also, if you know that particular kind of mistake matches a very common mental model of kids in that particular learning stage, you realize the kid is actually on track. What happens? The kid thinks that big animals should have big names and small animals should have small names. The kid thinks that the names are actually representations of the animals, not of the sounds, the way we understand. And this way, with that understanding of what the kid is thinking, the mental model, you can create a strategy for challenge those assumptions and make the kid progress in their learning. Because learning, pretty much, the kid thinks like, okay, that's how the world, I explain the world, and then you create a conflict by showing a lot of exercise of big animals with small names and small animals with big names. And the kids suddenly need to rearrange her theory of the world to create a new theory, a new explanation, a new mental model. Okay, so pretty much what I'm saying here, that like the mistakes are a great opportunity. And by throwing the mistakes away, by not considering the mistakes, we are throwing the baby with the bathwater here. Mistakes are windows into people's expectations. They help you see what they're thinking and unveil the mental model in a way that like successful accomplishments don't do, because they just match in a different way. The mistakes are the real diamonds here. They actually provide this information as very insightful. So what if you shifted the way you look at people and try to actually also consider the mistakes and look at like unexpected reactions, wrong decisions, things they did like failed attempts in a website or in different experiences, and start to look at those things as a way to understand what they're thinking actually, what's behind their minds, what's the mental model, what the hypotheses they have, what the intentions they have, and to create a better user experience. So let's very quickly go over some like examples of mistakes in a web context. This guy here, for instance, wants to buy panniers bags for his bike, and he searched for many different bags and add all to the cart. But you know, after a few days, he goes there, delete all, and don't buy anything. Like, okay, that's in a regular situation, it's just like he's ignored, right? But actually, this was a situation that was telling something. Same thing here. The same guy was doing a lot of research at Google about panniers, bikes, and reviews and searching for information. But then he just stops, and then starts to Google some other things. And after a while, he just goes back to research at pannier. So, by considering those mistakes, you start to say, like, what this thing is telling me? And then you pair this with other cues that you can track from their behavior. You start to elaborate a mental model about what actually he's thinking. He thinks that, like, he likes to research a lot, to look at a lot of different options before deciding on what to buy. He actually hates impulsive buying. And then knowing that information, you say, okay, if I know that you hate impulsive buying, being pushy and trying to just throw a lot of things for you, you actually set you off, and they'll lose you as a client in this particular situation. So, okay. So what I'm trying to say here, the same model that I explained in adaptive learning education, where like I can create a mental model, understanding what are the challenges that a particular kid has in progressing, or what are the hypotheses that a particular kid, what expectations a particular kid has in terms of around the written system. How we can trace a parallel to also UX as a general. How you can explain that particular insight here to a more broader, impactful situation. And that's what I'm calling adaptive UX. It's not a super creative name here, but it's pretty much because it just works a little bit in terms of, say, like, it's a new UX that really adapts to you based on your context, your intentions. And the same way that like personalized learning is adaptive learning is a step up from personalized learning. In this case, like personalized learning is pretty much like a static decision tree where like you know one thing and they have one answer that has two options and take different paths, but pretty much the paths are pretty much pre-established. Then you have adaptive learning where like the paths are not pre-established. They're very dynamic, and the pathways very often are just created on demand based on what you're doing and how you're answering and what you're thinking and the mistakes you're having. So the same way we can think about adaptive UX as an evolution of the personalization as well. Like while one-to-one personalization, it usually is more static, finds what you are, and that's who you are for that particular experience. Adaptive UX extends to a situation considering not only who you are in a particular moment, but how you are in different contexts that you change every day. We all are not ever the same person all the moments. Like sometimes like I'm with my family, it's a different way, friends a different way. Sometimes like I'm very happy, I want to write a lot of stuff. Sometimes I'm sad. So like people change, and then even like one snapshot of who you are will not suffice to provide a proper personalization to you because you're not always the same. So adaptive UX tries to consider that by creating a dynamic way to provide a personalization. And then, like, how could this new user experience provide? What could this new user experience provide? Like, you could suddenly have a situation that people like are just confused, and by identifying the person is confused, you can change the experience to provide that particular pathways to navigate in a situation. What would be very annoying for somebody that's not confusing. Like you can provide a reassurance, you can change the whole situation. They're saying like, what kind of reassurance you need to keep doing what you want to do. And then the same way with the bike, right? The bike, teaching a kid to ride a bicycle, you understand what's the right way to provide the reassurance to the experience to be successful. Promote learning, like education, and you can adapt to the styles that you have different days. If you're asking what the thing is, there's 3 mustaches. They're kind of weird. And how different is adaptive UX from the current UX paradigms models? First, I think is this idea that like the current UX and the personalization is pretty much about pushing you things like, hey, do this, buy this, be this, right? And then you have, once you move to a model where by understanding what your expectations are, you can actually care about the outcomes and own you and provide experience that like it's not about only a metric of like yes you buy, yes you didn't buy, but actually go beyond in terms of like and assessing also like how the experience was successful in providing you comfort and making you feel cared about. And also is a shift from usability to cognitive empathy. In this case, like we all know what usability is. In this case, cognitive empathy would be a different way to understand actually what would be the best way to provide the experience, how to adjust the experience, and then from there, provide a better usability. Okay, but we have a problem. machine learning is not there yet, and may never be. Like machine learning, like we all know, like all these beautiful movies about the future of AI and how they're going to take over and they're going to be all replaced by machines. And the truth is that like these are beautiful stories. I love to watch those movies, but they're not true yet. A lot. Maybe they never be, because it's a lot of hype. It's a lot of things that machines cannot do. Like for instance, machines cannot feel things. They cannot really understand the meaning of things yet. Like you can maybe tell them what this thing means and scale that by repetition of data, but they not can do the things. But there's actually, we don't need to be, machine learning don't need to be so intelligent to be successful, because we can get a lot done with human-computer collaboration. That's a big thing. Like, interesting enough, today I was reading some news, and there was this article about comparing like cancer diagnostics, and then was the error rate. Let me check the numbers to not saying something wrong. The human error rate was 3.5% of diagnosing. Oh my God, diagnosing a cancer of somebody. Then the AI, the error rate was 7.5%, even higher than the human. But then AI plus humans working together, the error rate was only 0.5%. And that's one of the things, like the collaboration can really, really be the best way for us to live with AI and make AI the best of what we can be. We need humans a lot. We need humans, experts, to understand the meaning of content. Like in this case, like on the right, you had the experts, teachers, helping us to understand like what those mistakes would mean, those random words would mean, and classify them in different like categories of level of education, of understanding of the written language. Netflix, the same thing. They understand, they observe how different aspects of the movie impact you and interest you, and they create micro-genres that are to very specific ways to classify movies, much beyond the action, romance, or drama. Like visually striking, goofy action and adventure is one category they have. And that granularity helps to tailor the personalization in a way that's very, very special. We need the designers like you to be able to teach the machines what empathy, cognitive empathy is. That like you need to model like what would be the behaviors that I should observe that would mean something to the machine, and also what to do with that particular information. That's a very thing. That's like as I saw in many lectures today. Like the user is always the part that identifies with the designers here, especially in the user experience conference like here. So that's our role here. It's like to figure out like also how to help the machines to do this particular classification. And of course, you need the people using it, the individuals, to tell if you're getting it right or not. Like that collaboration happens in many levels, in the creation and the design, and also in the use of the service, especially in the use of the service. So a quick overview here about a recap of what I just said. So there are two different core moments of the adaptive UX. The same way with education, right? You have the first one, you track, you observe what's going on, including the mistakes. Then identify implicit structures, data patterns, that's pretty much the big data, trying to get a lot of data and see what emerges. And then you have the explicit structures, like the mental models, the designers, the teachers, already identified and can be helped to feed that, and also preferences of the person. And then you create this live, dynamic mental model that you help understand like the hypothesis for the users in terms of like what they want to do, what expectations they have, what interests they have. And then you validate and keep evolving in that particular mental model. In the same way with the kids doing different exercises, answering different dictations, it's a dynamic diagnose. It's not a static diagnose. And then from there, you deliver an act. You have this other stance where like you just create the experience based on that particular information that I know about you. Okay, I know that like you're very anxious in riding your bicycle. I'm going to help you ride your bicycle with that particular information. And then you adapt the collaboration based on some cues as well. Like in the bicycle example, like you can just cry, or in a different shopping experience, you can never come back. It's pretty much a loop that goes back and forth several times, like being this dynamic situation. So let's go a little bit over one example of adaptive UX, but through the lens of text editors. I know, because it probably is simpler to explain, text editors are very basic, and let's put in perspective how that evolved, this human-computer collaboration through time. Because as you noticed in the previous one, the collaboration is a key aspect of adaptive UX to actually work. And then this collaboration also has been evolved a lot through time. And so like they started, like in the beginning, a text editor was something pretty much like a tool, like a hammer, right? Something that does a very simple action and helps you to extend your human power just by hammering something. But then, as technology evolves, we start to get in a situation where like we're interacting with agents, with a coach, or somebody that's helping us to do much more than just extend our power with a hammer. So the first example is like a VIM. It's like a super basic command line interface text editor, where pretty much you just enter the data there by hand. You have like all the technical tasks of editing are still made by the human. There's not a lot of much automation. Then we evolved to text edit, that like start to have this WYSIWYG graphic user interface. Okay, that's kind of cool. I can actually understand what I'm doing. Suddenly, now I can actually jump to a line by just clicking on where I want to be instead of having to go down, 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 left, 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 like before, right? You start to have like this interaction that's more natural. We have a lot of tasks that start to become combos and automated for you based on your intention. It's a clear moment. And you start to see a shift from the machine start to adapt to the human instead of the human having to adapt to the machine. Then you have like with more advanced like writers, like for instance like Microsoft Word, we start to have like a evolution from just looking at helping you to do things faster, but also to observe the content itself. It's still at word level. So you start to understand what the content is, start to have a spell check, for instance. You start to have a moment, if you click in an image, the options you have to do in your menu are different than if you click in a text. So the content starts to be meaningful as well to the machine and be contextually provide you some experience based on that. Then the next generation of text editors, you have like a Grammarly, for instance. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that. It's a writing enhancement. It's not only helping, it's start to see content in a more broader way, beyond just the word level, but in a structure like phrase and paragraph level. It starts to not only help you correct, but also helps you to be a better writer, in a sense that it shows you like some better styles to communicate in English. For me, it's super useful because I'm not a native English speaker, so it's not something that is natural for me just by hear. So I need to, that's how you do this, and then very easily can go and expand that to know why this is happening and develop also your skills in terms of like what you can be, how can you write. So what would be an adaptive editor? Like a co-author, a critique partner? I don't know. No, I'm kidding. There's I did one version here just to communicate what maybe some of the positionings. The visuals are not at all here, clearly. I just copy pretty much from Grammarly. But the idea here is to see that we start to have some contextual cues that are informing the interface. The machine would be observing you, tracking you in terms of how proactive are you writing? What's your style for writing? What's the style of what you're writing? How often you go back and forth in trying to do things? And how decisive you are in writing, or a more hesitant, and things like that start to inform how often. I think it's very hard to read there, but pretty much you start to inform that your style of interacting with the machine. Maybe in my case, in this case there, it's a prescriptive text, trying to describe something. It would show that because you're still trying to. You're not completely confident. They realize that you're more open to interference, more open to critique and advice than if you would be an expert. And also clearly extend hey, you should check it out, this particular article that also is talking about a similar subject, and then you should check before you try to repeat the obvious here. And so forth. Okay, that would happen. What would happen if it would be, for instance, a narrative? The same thing, again, the visuals are not considered here, but suddenly, I realized, you're a very experienced writer, and you have maybe a behavior of dump a lot of thoughts right away and you don't want to be interrupted at all while doing that. And then once you're done and do a pause, you're open to critique. So these simple things, little things, but it's a different style of interaction that acknowledges that your mental model and your skill level to help you to be better. Or can maybe go crazy this one that completes the phrases for you. That's kind of just a AI experiment that taking some random phrases from different stories, and that would just, as you type, completes for you with something that makes sense. Okay, this is more absurd, but why not? But what's happening is actually we can see a progression of technology. You can see technology progressing and the ability progressing with time. But what happens as we start to talk about AI, the expectations go skyrocket. And then suddenly there's a big gap, right, between what actually the machine can do and what we think the machine can do. In this case, when you talk about artificial intelligence, we all have this mental model, okay, this is intelligent. And intelligence has a lot of connotations for us human about what intelligent means. So we expect the machine to be as intelligent as we think intelligence is. So one of the things is to observe that gap. And that gap is a design problem that we as designers need to solve. Managing expectations and help people to understand how to actually use that particular features, the intelligence of the machine, is a design challenge that we need to address, because designing that gap is designing how machine and computers collaborate. We have this interesting quote from Garry Kasparov, a chess master in a freestyle chess competition. So what is a freestyle chess competition? Is a tournament of chess where the players can be any combination of a machine or a human or a mix of both. And what happened in that particular tournament, you have Garry Kasparov, the best chess player, human. You have a supercomputer as a chess player. But who won the tournament were an average chess player and average computer, but with the best collaboration interface between the two. And that's the interesting thing, this collaboration provides much more richness and the potential than having each one working in isolation. We talk so much about humans being replaced by machines. Yes, it's for some very repetitive basic areas, it will be true. But for most of the situations, most of our future and the future of our kids will be about collaboration. And our challenge as designers is to design for that future. And adaptive UX, the way we are always very used to think about designing as designing artifacts, right? Design a particular object, design a particular website. Now design, especially when we start to talk about artificial intelligence, is designing this relationship between humans and computers. We're designing this collaboration between humans and computers. What is really hard but is also really exciting. And the UX adaptive UX is actually one of these designs of these relationships between humans and computers. And the question is like, are you guys up for the challenge that's coming for everybody here? Like, especially now, I use the text editor as an example because it's very more concrete and basic. But we're entering wearables, as in the talks you heard earlier. We're entering into the space of augmented reality, where suddenly you have content being overlaid in your reality, and then you need to trust a lot that machine, that they're going to show you the right thing in the right moment, and not just junk your world more with a lot of things you don't need. This relationship is based on empathy. Like, suddenly this machine needs to understand me and my feelings and my intentions, and to provide me the right content. It's a world that's coming. Maybe it's still like 5-7 years still away, but it's coming. And I think that's something that we need to start thinking about and be ready for this particular challenge.
Ontem eu fiz uma palestra e eu comentei sobre Ted Nelson. Eu vi na sua pesquisa que tem bastante disso do futuro da internet. Ele sempre dizia, o futuro da internet está no texto. E eu queria entender assim de você, se você acredita nisso também. E eu, assim como pesquisadora também, eu comentei isso na palestra também, que não, o futuro não está só no texto, mas os brasileiros, eles têm uma conexão com empatia e com colaboração. E o que você acha que nós, como UX designers, tendo isso como um comportamento natural dentro dos brasileiros, como que eu acho que a gente está mais conectado com esse futuro. E eu queria saber a sua opinião, que é uma pessoa que mora lá e viveu aqui. O que você acha disso?
Sobre o futuro da internet em texto que você falou, é uma coisa complicada. Acho que o que eu posso dizer, que eu posso afirmar, é que o que a gente está muito caminhando é para comandos de voz. Mas comandos de voz, na verdade, quando você trabalha com a máquina, vira um texto. Então, é sempre Natural Language Processing. Você fala uma pergunta, a máquina converte aquela pergunta em texto, processa o texto e te responde. Então, nesse sentido, sim, texto ainda vai ser mais importante do que nunca, porque você tem que entender, analisar aquele conteúdo do texto para dar o conteúdo para você. Em relação ao futuro, é muito difícil de dizer se realmente vai ser o que vai determinar tudo, né? Mas, então, a sua segunda pergunta, em relação ao brasileiro, e como que o brasileiro se posiciona em relação a... É estranho falar português agora, né? Como se posiciona em relação se compara aos outros designers. Realmente eu tenho uma experiência que eu já vivi nos Estados Unidos, moro há mais de 12 anos, morei na Itália por 2 anos e morei aqui, me formei aqui, cresci aqui. Então eu sei que, eu vejo que o brasileiro tem 2 coisas que são muito especiais, assim. Uma é um conforto muito grande com ambiguidade. Porque acho que a gente vive num mundo sempre ambíguo, sempre variando, e também essa conforto em se virar com o que se tem, em vez de esperar a situação ideal, as condições ideais para poder executar alguma coisa. A gente tem isso aqui, vamos para frente, a gente consegue executar com o que a gente tem, em vez de ter que esperar, não, eu não posso fazer isso aqui porque não tem aquela coisa ideal. Essa é uma postura muito boa, que para o design é muito importante. Em termos de empatia, em termos de curiosidade, eu acho que não existe necessariamente uma diferença muito grande. A gente acha pessoas no mundo inteiro. Eu tenho amigos suecos, eles são super frios, assim, às vezes no relacionamento, mas eles são super emocionais também e conseguem ter essa empatia também. É uma característica humana, que eu não diria que é exclusiva do brasileiro. Mas o brasileiro, por causa da nossa cultura, do environment, do ambiente que a gente tem, a gente vê que a ambiguidade e se lidar com poucos recursos é uma coisa que a gente tem realmente como diferencial.
Oi, Belmer, tudo bom? Meu nome é Levi e assim, eu quero saber um insight, se você puder dar, porque você falou que o designer ele tem que preencher o gap ali entre a solução tecnológica, digamos assim, o que está sendo produzido, e ao mesmo tempo você falou que o designer precisa ensinar empatia para o computador. Mas eu vejo assim, a partir de tudo que eu já li com relação a machine learning e inteligência artificial, que a gente não permite que a máquina seja criativa. E para um designer, a criatividade é basicamente a chave para tudo. E como que você quer aprender a ter o Human Computer Collaboration com design com uma máquina que não pode ser criativa no momento, porque ela sempre tem barreiras, como no caso que o Facebook desligou aquele computador que estava fazendo compra, porque eles criaram uma linguagem nova. A que ponto que isso é ruim para o designer e como isso é o futuro para nós, assim? Porque eu vejo que não tem muito, não tem um guia, porque é uma coisa muito recente, mas que o designer, eu não sei como ele está se encaixando nesse contexto de inteligência artificial, porque quando eu leio design em inteligência artificial, geralmente é para programador que está programando a inteligência, e não realmente o designer que está ali vendo como a inteligência pode beneficiar aquilo que ele vai criar.
Na verdade, a tua pergunta tem a ver com o meu dia a dia. Eu trabalho nesse Building 8 no Facebook, que é um grupo que trabalha com inteligência artificial, augmented reality, e é uma coisa extremamente abstrata. É muito mais fácil quando você fala assim, tem um botão aqui, aperta o botão e o negócio acontece. A gente entra numa situação que você começa a ter por isso que esse trabalho começou a emergir também, porque você começa a entrar num espaço em que você tem que entrar numa compreensão das expectativas da pessoa, desse mental model que eu falei. É um modo de você partir, sair dessa coisa de ser reativa, de que assim, a pessoa clicou aqui, eu abro o menu, eu cliquei aqui, acontece alguma coisa. Isso vai começar a ficar muito mais difícil de acontecer, porque uma vez que tem augmented reality acontecendo, o celular não vai ser tão mais importante. Você não vai ter uma tela com 20 opções para selecionar. Então, saber o que mostrar para você vai ser muito mais importante. Em relação às máquinas serem criativas, elas não são criativas, né? Porque elas não sabem o que é ser criativo, mas elas podem criar experimentos. Por exemplo, tem situações de biologia em que as máquinas elas criam experimentos para testar uma hipótese, e os data scientists em volta, eles ajudam a máquina a realizar o experimento. Então, a máquina pode criar coisas, mas num domínio muito específico. Isso que acontece. Acho que a maior diferença não é sobre ser criativo ou não, é realmente essa coisa que o ser humano é único em conseguir ser criativo em várias áreas e cruzar domínios de conhecimento facilmente para ter novas ideias. As máquinas não conseguem fazer isso.
Última pergunta lá no fundo. Lá. Aqui, ó.
Tá.
Não estamos lhe ouvindo. Agora vai.
Oi. E aí, Belmer? Beleza? Muito obrigado. Tá ok. Muito obrigado pela palestra. Eu acho que esse tópico de Machine Learning e AI desperta muita curiosidade. Eu queria até complementar que, assim, a resposta... que uma coisa é entender o que as pessoas falam e outra coisa é a máquina em si responder ela, com conteúdo, intenções, etc. A minha pergunta envolve um pouco mais sobre, como você falou, a inteligência artificial ela só passa a ser inteligente com um conjunto de dados, assim como machine learning. Eu sei que você não pode falar do Facebook, mas já existem algumas teorias dizendo que o emotions, ou as emoções lá do Facebook, é o maior teste AB da vida.
É maior o quê?
O teste AB da vida. O Facebook está mensurando o que é que as pessoas acham sobre qualquer coisa. Eu não quero saber sobre isso, mas como é que você acha que o UX adaptativo entra no sentido de privacidade? E como é que pode ser o papel do UX para defender tanto o usuário, de ele não expor a sua vida completamente, e também conseguir proteger também o lado do negócio, conseguir apenas o dado que é necessário? Já existem algumas vertentes dizendo que para você ter uma certa experiência, você precisa dar algo em troca. E já tenho tido umas discussões assim, bem calientes sobre isso. E eu queria saber um pouco a sua opinião sobre isso.
O que acontece com a maioria dos serviços que a gente tem hoje em dia, que observam informações e usam essa informação para te dar um serviço de volta, tem como alguma coisa que é tipo um contrato social. Eu estou ok de dar minha informação, desde que o serviço que você me dá de volta é realmente valoroso para mim. Isso acontece com o Google, acontece com o Facebook, acontece com o Apple, com todas essas empresas grandes. Você dá informação para eles o tempo todo, porque, na verdade, o que você recebe em volta é valioso. Então, isso também vai existir com o Adaptive UX, com qualquer coisa. Assim, é um contrato de que se eu der informações para a máquina e essa máquina me ajudar a ter uma experiência única, me ajudar a escrever melhor, me ajudar a fazer o que eu quero fazer de um modo melhor, essa data, de repente, é uma coisa que eu não vou me importar em dar, porque o valor que eu recebo de volta vale a pena. A questão é, sim, tem a privacidade, tem toda essa informação. Eu não vou querer, eu dei essa informação para a máquina, não para o mundo inteiro, né? Eu não estou abrindo para o mundo inteiro essa coisa. Então, você tem que criar como eu falei, a relação Adaptive UX é o desenho de um relacionamento entre a pessoa e a inteligência. E o que é um relacionamento? Mesmo modo que o relacionamento com as pessoas é baseado em confiança, em trust, em empatia, em todas essas propriedades que ajudam as pessoas a realmente se sentir confiar, se sentir confortáveis com uma outra pessoa. Se você está desenhando se eu vou colaborar com você, colaboração só é bem sucedida por duas razões, com duas coisas. Vocês têm os mesmos goals compartilhados e vocês também têm as condições para colaborar, se colaborar juntos. Eu não falo em português muito bem, mas o lance é que o design dessas condições de colaboração vão criar as condições de que você vai se sentir confortável para dar um pouco de data em troca de alguma coisa valorosa para você e também confiar de que essa data vai ser usada de modo apropriado. Esses princípios todos, morais, de valores, são coisas que nós, como designers, temos o poder também de influenciar e criar. A gente não é uma situação, não somos passivos aqui em relação a, é assim que é o mundo do capitalismo. Não é. Todo dia a gente faz decisões de design que impactam várias pessoas. E o que a gente está fazendo aqui é pensar com antecedência que futuro que a gente quer. Que futuro que a gente quer ter junto com a inteligência artificial e como a gente pode desenhar esse futuro de modo que ele aconteça. Então é uma postura de não desistir, de fazer o que a gente acredita. É muito importante isso.
Muito obrigado, Belmer. Uma salva de palmas.